Alright guys, today I'm going to be reviewing Andy Anderson's new pro model board for you. It's his twin tail flight deck. It's his third shape with Powell Peralta. He sent it to me a little bit over a month and a half ago, and I did not expect to skate this for longer than 1 or 2 sessions, but I ended up skating it for over a month. So I've got a lot of thoughts, good and bad, about this board. So in this video I'm going to break it down for you so you can make up your own mind whether or not you want to spend $100 on a skateboard deck. So if I'm remembering the dimensions right, this board is an 8.4 on the widest point and then an 8.25 in the middle at the narrowest point. So this is like a reverse egg. So his last board was wider in the middle. This board gets wider around the bolts and skinnier in the middle. So you can't really say like it's this width because the width changes throughout, but yeah, I think 8.4 to 8.25. I believe that is the 2 widths. It also has this crazy tail where you've got a point here and a point here, so you've essentially got 4 different points along the tail, and then it is symmetrical, so you have the exact same thing on both sides. The graphic obviously is pretty beat at this point, but you got the Andy Anderson mind control fire hydrant thing, and then you got this dragon. I don't know all like the lore. I'm not like super into like Powell. I did do like a full like hour-long interview with Andy where he talked about all the details of his board on the Patreon. I'll leave a link to a free trial if you want to check that out. But for me, this graphic's not really hitting, I'll be honest. There's a lot of things about this board that for me, definitely not my style, but there's a lot of things about this board that surprised me. Like I said, I did not expect to like skate it for the full duration of a normal board. I expected to like try it and be done with it, but I liked it enough that I kept skating it. We'll get into why in just a little bit. Now, as many of you guys know, like Andy Anderson does not fit the mold of like skateboarding. He's definitely not the kind of skater that I'm really like normally into. I think I like Andy more as a person than I like his skating. He is like the most genuine, nice dude, but what I really like about Andy is that he thinks outside the box. We'll get into it in a little bit, like all of the little details of why this board is shaped the way that it is, and regardless if you love it or you hate it, I really respect that Andy is trying to do something different, because I feel like there's a lot of haters in skateboarding, and so it can be easy to just kind of like follow what everybody else is doing and like hard to like do your own thing, because you know, even if you're doing everything like the right way, like following the crowd, you're still gonna get hate just because you're around skateboarding, which I mean, that's part of what makes our culture like cool and unique and whatnot. It just is what it is, but I respect Andy for being willing to like take the hits and just like put new stuff out there and be willing to accept the criticisms along with like the praise and everything. So, and like I said, I talked to him for like an hour on FaceTime, and he's a nice dude. So I have nothing but good things to say about Andy Anderson. So with Andy Anderson's previous boards, the first one was that crazy original shape, super wide, made for transition skating. But as Andy's career has gone on, he's gotten more and more into street skating, and that's why he came out with the egg shape, which was his second shape with Powell. It was also symmetrical, but that one was a twin nose. As it turns out, that shape, Andy was not totally satisfied with it, but they had agreed on a date to release a product. It was the best that he had, but he said that there was something about it that he wasn't totally satisfied with. Even though he had fallen in love with skating a symmetrical board, there were certain aspects of his original board that he missed. So with this board, you've got a lot more of the elements of the first board, but also keeping the symmetrical style of the second board. Now, just like all of his other boards, this board is a flight deck. So you got 5 plies of wood and then 2 plies of carbon fiber, or I don't know what the reinforced material is, but it's super strong. That is one huge pro with this board, is with the flight deck material and concave, sideways and forward, like the shape of this board is incredibly strong, and it has held its shape from beginning to end. So there's been no sogginess, no mushiness. This thing has pretty much just as much pop as when it started, more so than any other board I've ever skated. So I was really impressed with the quality of the construction, because in the past when I tried a flight deck, I absolutely hated it. I hated the concave, I hated the shape. It felt springy and bouncy, and so this board was nothing like that. This board had a really good shape. It looks absolutely nuts, like obviously it looks crazy, but it held its shape extremely well, which for me is really, really important. I don't like my board changing. I don't like it squishing. I just like it to be the same from beginning to end. Okay, now let's get into talking about these weird angles here. So if you've seen videos about Andy Anderson explaining his previous board, some of this stuff is going to be familiar to you, but he put this point right here specifically for popping tray flips. He found that this is the point of your board that basically hits the ground and then starts that tray flip rotation. And so what he did is he basically accentuated that point on the tail so it would be easier to hit the tray flip spot on your tail. Same thing, you know, with this little curve right here, but for pressure flips. And then also by creating a long line along the back of the tail, that created a bigger sweet spot for popping your ollies. So this is like the Swiss Army knife tail shape for skateboards. It serves a lot of different purposes. Andy himself will admit though that a regular skateboard has all of these pressure points built into it. So he's not reinventing anything with this. What he's doing is he's accentuating different pressure points to make it easier to be able to pop your board in the middle, off the tray flip spot, the pressure flip spot, which I think is a really interesting idea. Now before I talk about whether or not that actually worked, I do have to say, looking down at this was a nightmare for me, especially for like the first week to 2 weeks. I really, really hated looking down at this. I started to get used to it, but still, when I set up my new Mario McCoy Santa Cruz twin shape that's just like a standard rounded nose and tail, I was so relieved. I hated looking down at the shape. Aesthetically, not for me. Same thing with the graphic. Not for me. Now, that being said, functionally, I have to say that this board, it works. This little point right here, it definitely helps with my tray flips. It creates more of a poppy vertical tray flip. It kind of forces more pop underneath your tray flips. I had my friend try it and his tray flips were popping probably like 3 to 4 inches higher without trying any harder. It just like naturally, you catch that perfect sweet spot more often and the board just flies up. And then also with it being 5 the board is so light and so strong. It's just like a perfect combination to like automatically add a few inches of pop to your tricks, which for me was like a very welcomed feature because I don't have much pop at all. Now, as far as like the quality and the durability, I mean, the only thing that's really going wrong with this board up until probably the last day I skated it, you know, it's not really even going wrong, but like starting to get a little bit of wear and tear right here, a little bit of razor tail. I'm gonna give this board away to somebody because it's still got plenty of life in it. But right here, it took forever to get a single chip, and this is the worst that happened. It did not fully, like, it started to delaminate, but like didn't completely blow out. I've had boards like, you know, from some of my favorite companies that you know, I'm doing tray flip up the Euro, hits the corner of the step up right there and it just blows out first day. So this board did that plenty of times. It took a long time for it to actually do any damage, and that you can kind of see multiple spots where the board took a hit. But yeah, durability wise, I'm really blown away. Like it's like night and day from my first experience with a flight deck to this one. This thing is I liked it. The biggest pro for me was just that it was constructed so well that it held its shape, didn't get mushy. It was just so solid, so poppy. It definitely felt like a level above your average like wooden popsicle skateboard. Average skateboards are, you know, around like 60 to 70 bucks nowadays, so you're looking at $40 to $30 more for this board. If you're somebody that breaks boards a lot, then that's probably definitely worth it for you, getting the flight deck. But I feel like for a lot of people, myself included, how strong this is a little bit like overkill. Like, I welcome it. I'm stoked to have such a solid board. I'm not sure if I really needed all that, if that makes sense. But as far as like the weight reduction, making it lighter, I definitely thought I would hate that, and I ended up really, really appreciating it because my flip tricks were just like sucking up to my feet. I thought because it was lighter, the board would just bounce off my feet. Like, over the years, I've gravitated more and more to like heavier boards. So this is my first time like going backwards and skating a lighter board, and yeah, no, surprisingly, I really liked it. Part of it could be that it's essentially an 8.5, but it flips more like an 8.2. So the ease with which you can get the board to flip is like a whole size down, but you've still got all the width and the real estate that you would have on like a wider board. So I found that really, really interesting. One tough thing about these boards is that I know they do sell out pretty quick, so it's almost like with Dunks, you kind of have to get lucky. But they're not as exclusive as Dunks. Like, you can definitely look online, find some place to order them. It's not that crazy, but I know that they do sell out. If they are sold out, you may need to wait a little bit. So it might be a little bit tricky getting this board consistently. So if you're somebody that, like me, I like to skate pretty much the same thing over and over and over again so that there's no change to my setup. If you're trying to make this your go-to board, you might run into issues with that. Now, one more feature I forgot to talk about is how you've got this bevel and then it juts out right here. Andy talked about how this board was specifically designed for flip tricks. So we talked about how there's different features when you're actually popping the board, but we didn't talk about when flicking the board. So Andy talked about how there's, you know, lots of different flicks when you're trying to flip your board. If you want to flick a really fast kickflip, you might flick down here by like the bolts. So he created this wing to create more friction and more grip at this point, but also this is kind of where you start your heel flip flick, is down here, as well as if you're trying to do a hard flip or a frontside flip or an inward heel flip, you're not really flicking off the nose, you're flicking more off the side. And so again, he took what a normal skateboard has and accentuated it to make it a noticeable difference. Now, for me, would I buy this board? I don't think I ever would. The reason being, I care way too much about what I am looking at. It just tripped with my eyes too much, like looking down. But if you're somebody that's like into weird shapes, you'll probably really like this. Everything about this board was like spot on. Great, except for like looking at it. And I gotta say, like actually skating it, did not notice much difference at all. If I like close my eyes, it was literally just another twin tail popsicle shape like I normally skate. But then, you know, when I'm looking at my nose and my tail, it just, to me, seems like completely off. But also, because it's got these angles, it gives your eyes more visual information to be like, oh, I want to flick off here, or I want to flick off there. Like, there's definitely benefits to each, you know, feature on this board. For me, it just doesn't outweigh how much it bothered me to like see not a skateboard under my feet. It just didn't look like a skateboard to me, and I definitely got a lot of weird looks from like different people because this is not like what I would ride, right? I'm not like the biggest Andy Anderson, you know, the way that he skates and everything. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I'm more into like P-Rod, Wade DeZarmo, like pretty standard style of skateboarding, or of street skateboarding. So I respect what Andy's doing and whatnot, but definitely like it's not totally my cup of tea. So basically what I'm saying is I'm shallow and I'm judging this book by its cover, but the contents inside are spot on. I have nothing to complain about. And beyond all that, just like on a higher level, the fact that Andy is, you know, taking a risk and doing something different, like I can't help but respect that. So if you are interested in learning more about Andy's board, I will link the full like hour-long Patreon interview that I did with him, where he like broke down all the specifics of the board and got really into like the nitty-gritty stuff. So I'll leave a free trial link in the description if you're into that. Remember to make every single day a Friday, and I'll see you guys in the next video.